2018 Yellow Springs Board of Education meeting. To welcome you all, we were in executive session at 6 o'clock, and we were moving forward to preliminary matters. And I'd like to acknowledge the people here. Ask that if you haven't signed in, there's a notebook in the back, or a piece of paper, I guess it's not a notebook anymore. If you wouldn't mind signing in and identifying yourselves. And we are moving into the approval of the minutes for September 13, 2018 and September 20th, 18. Oh, 25th, excuse me. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Any issues?
I have a question.
Yeah?
So I was not here the 13th, but I was here the 25th. So what do I do?
Well,
And I know I would abstain if it was just the one that I wasn't here for.
Separate.
We can vote on them separate.
Okay, thank you.
So I'll amend
we'll
my,
do September
to the
13th.
September 13th.
all right, we're good otherwise? Okay, so roll call for September 13th.
Okay, Sylvia,
Abstain.
Steve,
Yes.
Steve,
Yes.
TJ,
Abstain.
and Aida.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Motion for September 25th, 2018.
So moved.
Second?
All right. Roll call.
Steve,
Yes.
Steve,
Yes.
TJ, Aida,
Yes.
Sylvia.
Yes.
And you're correcting TJ on that? And she's TO on my agenda.
I put TJ in this.
Yeah, good. Okay, communications. I guess there's no communications to report about. Moving into 2.2. Community comments. Again, I'd like to recognize members of the audience who would like to address the board and ask that we respect our 3-minute limit to coming up to the microphone. And if you would identify yourselves when you come up to the microphone, that would be greatly appreciated.
I'll be timer.
And that would be great. Anybody would like to come up to the microphone? All right, moving into schools in action.
Well, I would like to say something.
Okay.
I was hoping somebody else would go first. I know I did badly on the timing.
Can you go up to the microphone, please?
Yeah. I'm Kathy Adams, and I have a son who's a junior, and graduated myself. I want to thank the school board and the superintendent for the letter to all the school families and putting it in the news as well. I have heard from some people that they wish they had been notified, gotten the same letter as well, that didn't see it in the paper and don't have children in the school. I want to let you know that. I appreciate your reasons are motivated by our student protection and privacy very much, and that's the most important thing. And I appreciate the actions you've taken and have planned for students concerning consent and promoting healthy relationships and decreasing dating violence. My feedback concerning the students is to bring in outside community resources because the trust has been lost. And especially ones that are utilizing peers, college-age students or high school students, to educate and relate to our students. Have a PTO meeting inviting community members to contribute because there's so many resources and we do have a town that has a lot of people you can draw from. And keep this going through K through 12 as a continual process. I pay for a full-time school nurse. It's worth it. It could be somebody that people confide in, students, and sexual health is an enormous part of our middle school and high school. Re-examine your BYOT policy. There's a lot of talk amongst parents that hate this policy because phones are a constant distraction in school, and there's a lot of bullying and sexual harassment done on phones. Step up your drug and alcohol abuse education using peers. My feedback for the school board and the superintendent is that I still feel like even though you're doing good things now, that you failed us because of the report by the first student in September. And I still find that very difficult, although I hear that you're saying you never knew about it. That tells me there's great communication problems. I'm going to go back to the levy, and I'm going to say there was a great communication problem with our entire community. And that's also reflected internally, is the way I see it, in the schools and with the superintendent and the school board and the administration. I see that everything was done right and legal, but we know lots of things in our country have been legal that are not moral. And it's really upsetting because I think there was probably much more harm in 6 months between the first report and when you all became aware of it. And it's really I'm much more concerned about the adults and their parts of it. Recognizing student privacy.
We're three.
We're 3.
We're at 3. Oh, I never heard the 1 minute warning.
Sorry, I'm writing down what you're saying because
Okay.
it's important.
Right.
Sorry, I'm trying to do something.
All right, well, thank you.
Thank you. All right, anybody else? All right, moving on to schools in action. I'd like to move into 2.3A, Community Solutions Presentation on the Development of the Bike Path to Agraria. Welcome.
Thank you. Hi, I'm David Diamond. I'm the Media and Education Coordinator at Community Solutions and Agraria. And this is, many of you know, Susan Jennings, our Executive Director. I'm just talking about this tonight because it's more the area that I've been working in. We are in full swing right now with educational programming. I mean, we're ramping up a lot from where we have been. To begin with, the 7th graders are coming out on Tuesday the 23rd to do their Into the Wild presentation. They're at presentation night at Agraria in our barn, which they did last year, and it was very successful. Many things are happening, and a lot of them will be greatly improved once we're able to add a bike path going from the high school to Agraria, which has always been one of our goals. For example, on the 23rd, community members would be able to bike out if they wished, if we had a trail already. What we have here is a map showing the terminus of the proposed trail, which is on our property, and then the path that it would take through one other landowner's property who is a good friend of ours, and we're doing really well with working out either an easement or a land gift or sale that would allow that to happen, and then crossing onto school property and ending at East Enon Road and Paxson there in the village. And we've got, we're applying for a Clean Ohio Trails Fund grant that's due February 1st to pay for a good chunk of that, which brings up a couple possibilities. One thing we wanted to do tonight was what we'd like to have for that application is a letter from the board expressing permission for us to put the path on school property and finish it there on East Enon Road. What that would allow also is more programming, easier access for school programs at Agraria. For example, we're getting ready to do Project Bluebird with Becca Eastman and her 7th graders. And we've received a grant from the Greater Conservation Fund of the Dayton Foundation, Greater Dayton Conservation Fund of the Dayton Foundation, to purchase equipment for that. And a lot more equipment could be purchased because we're in the finals for the Ohio Environmental Education Fund grant, which we're hoping to hear about in the next couple of weeks. But the equipment is already paid for that we would need for Project Bluebird. It's just if we already had a trail, the logistics would be much easier and the expense much less to have the 7th graders visit. So that's an example of the type of programming that is going to be enabled by this trail. And
Did you want to say anything about potential facilities?
yeah, sure, right. So when we do apply for the Clean Ohio Trails Fund grant, there's you can put into the grant for equipment and facilities at the trail terminus. So if there's anything that would also serve the school, that the schools that you would like to see put into the grant, like bike racks or something similar to that, that could be of mutual benefit.
Do you mind taking some?
No, I think that's a good time for that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So thank you for coming to present this to us. And I think this is at least the second time, maybe the third time. Second time that we've had you here to talk about this. And you know, this board member at any rate is very enthusiastic about the possibilities here. My questions are about, if you had, if I'm remembering correctly, last time we spoke about this, you hadn't yet zeroed in on the kind of path we're talking about and therefore the kind of expense we were talking about incurring. And we had some questions also about right-of-way and liability stuff if this trail were to come across the high school as well. And I wonder if you've been able to get any more clarity on those questions.
Certainly, yeah. We have been in discussion with an engineering firm from Cincinnati, and we've clarified with also the property owner in between us and you.
Right.
And we've definitely settled on a crushed limestone surface for the path. And the latest expense that we've seen is between 600 and 700,000 for the project as a whole, of which we would have to provide a certain match.
Right.
And I think land that you allow us to use might count towards that. So there's a lot of math.
And assuming the money all lined up, how long would this take to complete?
Well, we would hear about it this time next year, and then you have 18 months to complete. But we hope to actually, if we do get permission from the school board, we'd actually like to get started on clearing at least the land here. The high school track team already uses that, so our goal is to actually start doing a walking trail that would be simpler. So basically, we hope to be ready. We're doing engineering before the grant actually goes in. So the goal would be to get it going just as soon as we possibly could.
Okay, and then one more, and then I'll stop harassing you. What's our schedule here for considering a letter of support?
The grant itself is due February 1st.
Oh, okay.
So we do have a little time,
right.
And that was purposeful. I've already had a meeting with Mr. Besora, and we had a good start. But to talking, but there's always things like that come up. Well, what about this? What you mentioned,
absolutely.
Liability concerns, and the specifics of the path. There are a lot of things I think still to be discussed. So we wanted to just really bring it to everyone's attention now, so there's time to have those conversations.
Thank you.
What's the distance we're talking about?
Just a little bit less than a mile.
Okay, great, thanks.
So where it divides out now,
labeled as gravel and asphalt, it would be all crushed limestone now.
Right, we just didn't have, at the time that we put this map together, we didn't have.
No, that's fine, I just wanna
updated-
make sure, because I'm reading it and
Yeah.
seeing gravel, asphalt, and you're saying crushed limestone, okay,
Yes.
thanks.
Yeah.
Can I just say, look, Steve, sorry.
No, that's, is the goal to have more classes be able to come visit easier? How are we getting the classes there now? Is that all of us, like, is that a funding issue? So, okay.
It's not so much a funding issue, it's just so.
Right, because there's clearly a direct path without
Right, but I mean, you know, everything that you don't spend on a bus, you can.
You're right, it's still, yeah, it saves, I just wanted to know.
And then the other part of that, Steve, is that there are high school, like, seniors who may want to do service projects and they would be able to walk
They're-
out or bike out.
Right, that's
so,
what I mean,
yeah,
so it'd just
yeah.
be that much of an easier, that's what I wanted to know, and also, lighting, I mean, has that been something that you've already
No, we
discussed
have
in
not
that?
talked about that.
No, really, that's
Things
a
along
good
those lines.
point.
Yeah, safety, I know is
Yeah,
gonna
yeah.
be the first thing to
Well,
come up when you're talking about a model for students.
Yeah.
Sure, one thing I know that, that is, one thing that, we definitely have to address for the grant is the lighting at the termini, which would be, you know, on our property and then over at your end, that they want that well lit, which I, you know, I would have to look at the specifics of the streetlights over here, and we have to look at the specifics. It's, you know, I think they're concerned, they're mostly proposing it for day use.
Right.
So they're concerned more about lighting at the termini, I think.
Can I just,
Yeah.
I just want to say, we've been working together fairly well for the past couple of years now, and I've enjoyed working a lot with, you know, everybody, and Susan, she's wonderful, and it's been great to just see their vision coming to fruition. And I think the two organizations gel really well together. I mean, we work with a lot of different organizations in town, especially on a lot of our project work, but I'm willing to say that Community Solutions might be our best partner right now within the community in terms of their just openness and you know, flexibility and willingness to work with us, and it gels really well with us. But the other piece of this is, if it sort of works out the way we want it to, the long-term vision is that your senior year has become an increasing concern of mine, you know, in general. It's a concern across the country, really. Seniors, and what do we have for them to do? A lot of kids are doing more and more college credit plus classes, or they're in and out of the buildings, which has its benefits and its detractions. Often when you have your leaders in the building gone, it affects the culture within the entire school in ways that aren't always the best, I think. And we want our kids to go to college, but we don't want them to go too early as well. And we also want, a lot of times our kids are going because they don't have other real options at the school, new classes or other programs they can get into that are really be exciting. So wouldn't it be great if we had an opportunity for a senior year where kids who had the credits could do a half day essentially where they're doing work at the farm and getting so many credits for that work, and then maybe some kind of special certificate, we can do a graduation around it. And they're doing real, authentic agri-research to make the world a better place. And then coming back and, I mean, you know, making that a real, authentic PBL experience that's contributing beyond their school, beyond their community to improving agriculture worldwide. And then having the kids do that, bike over there and back, would be really powerful, and then maybe building up a program so that by the time they're seniors, and maybe we can figure out a way, and I think somebody alluded to this last time, I think we talked, the idea of getting it to, tying it into career ed somehow again, in a way that would make sense. If you remember, we tried an agriculture career ed program, and there was a real disconnect between the Monsanto philosophy and our philosophy, and so ultimately I'm not sure quite gelled, but maybe a sustainable ag connection this way, maybe, just maybe might work. And I think the bike path is a great conduit to make that happen. You know, if you build it, they will come. I think that's the,
Did our attorney's blood pressure go up at all?
no, they know we're a little bit different, so I don't think so. We do a lot of creative different things that are.
But we think that this can work out?
Yeah.
Okay. That's
Yeah,
great.
I think they talked about the easement idea as a great way to do it.
Okay.
And it's a fairly easy move. Shouldn't be too much
What's
of a problem.
what's the maintenance like? I'm sure with crushed limestone, it's not bad, but it's, I mean, is the district gonna have to maintain the district's portion there? on school property? Is there,
We would definitely want to work together on that, I mean, and figure out what's an appropriate, mix of, if there's gonna be a student service component to that, if that would make sense. We're certainly looking at handling the bulk of the maintenance, through volunteers and through staff. And it, the word that I had on it was that it's more frequent than it would be for a paved path, obviously, but it's also less intensive. So that, every three to 5 years, you're getting people out there and you're shoveling, gravel, and it's more something that people could do rather than, necessarily always calling in appropriations. I wanted to respond a little bit to what Mr. Pizarro said, that one thing I forgot to mention is we're about to have a Nature Conservancy start a restoration project on Jacoby Creek, and they have already, actually as part of our application for the Ohio Educational Fund grant, the Environmental Education Fund grant, they've already agreed to participate in education and to actually have their staff conduct some of the education. It's a national nonprofit that handles restoration, so they would be, some very sought-after experts. I think that could be really productive to involve the students with. And also, the elementary school, we've had already Peg Morgan's third grade class come out and do soil research, and they've been known to take a bike trip from Mills Lawn. I don't think it's too much to think that they might use it a lot as well.
Great. Great. Thanks, anybody else? Okay, well, thanks
Thank you.
very much. It's very exciting. Yeah.
That's great.
All right. The 8th grade trip presentation. See, Lori is.
I'm not Lori, but I'll be presenting.
Great.
Which looks like Lori, for purposes.
Yes. If you want, I will.
Thank you.
Take one and pass it down. This is just our itinerary.
Sure.
It has a lot of details to it, so I just thought you guys could look at it as I'm
Sure.
giving you
Thank
the spiel. Yeah.
So I don't know if you all know Courtney, you probably met Courtney O'Connor at the board meeting. I was not here, because I was in Europe, I think.
Yeah.
But she's our new social studies teacher.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm the 8th grade social studies teacher, and Lori Sparrow Knapp and I are kind of in charge of organizing the Washington DC trip this year for our 8th grade students. So you guys all have a copy of the itinerary, so I'm not going to go through every single thing, because as you can tell, we have a very packed 3 to 4 days. Yeah, we're really excited. So I'll just give you the main details, and then if you have any questions, I'll try my best to answer them. Just so you know, this upcoming Wednesday, October 17th, we have a parent informational meeting about prices, possible payment plans, and due dates for the trip. So the plan at this moment is that approximately 40 8th grade students will be able to attend, with 4 to 5 teacher chaperones. And like I said, we're going to Washington, D.C. And Gettysburg. We are going April 4th through 7th. And we're going because this is really feeding into our 8th grade curriculum. It's U.S. history, and we're going to actually be standing in the places and looking at the different monuments of people that they've been learning about all year. So we are going to, especially in the spring, Ms. Sparrow Knapp and I are going to work together to do some kind of like live history performance project with the students that involves Gettysburg, to really get them to understand the meaning of going to that battlefield and that kind of thing. Highlights of the trip, they're going to this new production in Washington, D.C. called JQA, which is at Arena Stage. And they have backstage passes and a private tour. So I'm really excited about that. Ms. Sparrow Knapp set that up, and the students are thrilled. And we are right now looking at a price between $500 to $540 price range for students. But that could lower if we get our arena trip tickets funded, or with fundraising opportunities, that price could also lower as well. So we already have a fundraiser at the Sunflower Festival, and we'll be fundraising throughout the year. So we're going to be asking for parent support with that at the meeting. And I don't believe we're doing any parent chaperones for this trip. From what I've been told, it's all staff chaperones and then the 40 students. Any questions?
How many kids are in the 8th grade?
I believe around like 60, 59, 60, yeah. So there will be just like a cutoff, so at this point, it's like first come, first serve, we'll open it up when the deposits are due, and that's how I think it will be decided.
Just real quick, I wanted to share that we changed tour companies this year, so we used Classic Student Tours in the past, and we went with 20th Century Tours. Our trip is about $150 to $110 cheaper this year than it was in the past, and we went from 3 days to 4 days, and we're able to get into things that we were never able to get into in the past. So it's pretty exciting for me to be able to offer more for less money to our students.
What happens if not available?
So there are certain things on the itinerary that, so for example, the African American Museum that's a part of the Smithsonian.
Right, this is really hard to hear.
That is very exclusive, and they cannot guarantee big groups at certain times. So what we're gonna try to do is go and like present ourselves, because that's how you actually get in there.
Yeah.
And if they can't take us at that moment, then we'll return at another time and try to switch it
So
out.
there is a plan B for all these, because the
Yes.
Holocaust Museum is another, it's not easy.
So, yeah, we're definitely going there, but 20th Century Tours said it was too early for them to guarantee a spot.
Okay,
Yeah, so all of those are like, the Holocaust Museum, we're definitely trying to go there, but it's so early that they're not taking reservations.
yeah, exactly, okay.
That's pretty typical what we've seen with our other
Yeah,
companies in the
all
past
of
as
these
well.
I've seen, that's what it's like.
Yeah.
Well, I just wanted to know if there's a plan B, but, so is the plan B, if they say we'll come back in 2 hours and, you know?
Yeah, they're very flexible. I think that's one of the reasons why Ms. Baranow has really advocated for them, because they are flexible, and they believe in like taking some time at each stop. Like last year, they only got, I believe, 45 minutes or so at the Holocaust Museum, and I want them to have like way more time than that, and then time to decompress afterwards and have discussions, so.
Looks exhausting.
Yeah.
So thank you so much.
Oh, I'm a history teacher, it's what I live for, so.
I would be happy to receive a exhausted third. Is there any accommodation on, I mean, I know you said first come, first serve, but if there's students who may not have the means to make it, or I mean, their spots open, is there a way to not make it so that they get boxed out?
So from
I
what
don't know if there's a.
with this being a new tour company, the parent meeting is on Wednesday, so I have the woman that we're working with, Tracy, at 20th Century Tours, getting back to me with like as many payment plan options as possible to make it affordable. And I know like with other field trips, we have like parents sponsor students, but nothing, like that's for like a $15 permission slip fee, like this is a huge amount. So at this point, all I have the solution for that is fundraising. I would be completely open to looking into anything that could give someone the means to go or get that deposit down.
Yeah, I don't have any
Yeah.
suggestions, I just want to know if there's a way.
So I'm open to those suggestions.
So they didn't lose out because it took
Right,
a while to get
exactly.
there.
Yeah. That's understandable.
So I know a few years ago, for the kids who didn't go on the 8th grade trip, then there was this alternative trip with them to Cincinnati to do cool history stuff.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that's.
I haven't planned for that yet, but I would definitely like be open to like, suggestions like that. I'll be on the trip, but I don't know like what options we can provide.
Yeah, I'm not trying to make
students
work
do that.
with people, I just know that
No.
happened one year. There was an alternative for the
Yeah.
8th grade students who didn't go to DC.
And that would make me feel better to know that they are receiving some kind of enrichment, especially like in Cincinnati, like they haven't gotten the opportunity to go to the Underground Railroad
Yeah.
Museum and that kind of thing, so I would definitely be open to that. And that's why we're having the parent meeting so early, like the trip is in April, we're doing this in October, just to give everyone fair warning. And we're really encouraging the parents to be involved with fundraising, so.
And we'll just also, you said you're filling in for someone, so but I need to know who that is in their email. HRC is somebody where I would say on the first, there's a meeting. and they have things for,
Tell her what HRC is.
oh, Human Relations Commission here in town. And, right, but they like to provide scholarships for things like
Oh,
this to
cool.
help. And so, yeah, I'm pretty sure that HRC would be more than willing to help with
Yeah.
this to allow more students to go, because this is more things than I've done, and I've lived near DC.
Yeah, yeah, I really
Pretty
want to give
jealous.
them all the opportunities, so I'm definitely open to like any and all fundraising. And I know when we have the parent meeting, I'm assuming, because a lot of them have already talked to me about the local resources that they have to kind of get us started and connected with fundraising.
So I can email you then as well?
Of course, I
Okay.
encourage anyone to email me or Ms.
It should be-
Farrow.
Okay.
And it's
Yeah.
Miss Farrell now, she's in there too.
And I've been like doing things like this in the evening just because she has rehearsals right now. So you can email either one of us and we'll get back to you.
One more time, what was your name?
Courtney O'Connor.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do you have a question?
Yes, I don't want to sound redundant. This gentleman, I don't know your name, I know Steve, but I was just curious if there were going to be grants offered to parents that their children could go and on a time span they could pay that back. Because and another thing, I've got so many thoughts going through. Scholarships obviously would be great. But there are many, since we live in such an artist town, I've been to many, fun, kind of not advertised or big events like, that I've gone to with the senior centers, but, bands, they will, hold spontaneous kind of fundraisers where, like at the Spirited Goat. And I was just wondering if maybe that would be another avenue to try to reach out to, because, we are such an artistic community, and with that, I feel like there's, a very strong, sensitive heart that goes with it. And I was just wondering if maybe that might be an avenue also, because I've been to several fundraisers, so to speak, that, people aren't required to, buy a seat, or, they give what they can. And I don't know, it has worked out for a lot of families. I mean,
I think that's what they're hoping for, and I think they're getting ideas tomorrow night with families, as well as the students frequently come up with really creative options as well.
exactly.
So I think those are really great.
I heard these two gentlemen speak, and, I didn't hear them say, hey, let's just go out to the community to our talent. And there's a lot of talent out there. And I know I feel they would really step up so that children who live in our community and cannot afford, or the parents can't afford, would really go to the ends of the earth to see that these kids could. I mean,
I'm sorry to interrupt you, I appreciate your thoughtfulness around this, but we have some other presentations we need to get
Sorry.
to as
Let's
well.
go right ahead.
Appreciate your
Yeah,
interest in that
being
and your
redundant.
suggestion. No, that's fine, but appreciate that. And I think you hit on sort of the artistic element of the community and reaching out to them, so I think Courtney can take that with her and.
Yes, I absolutely agree. I mean, this is my first year with the district and I've already seen like this outpour of generosity. So I'm definitely, here to present this and for approval and that kind of thing. But I really hope that if you have any ideas or fundraising opportunities, we're definitely open to any and all of them. And Lori has a lot of those connections with local groups and that kind of thing.
Good,
So
okay.
we will be reaching out definitely.
Thank you.
Thanks, Courtney.
Thanks, Courtney. Thank
We'll
you.
get Dawn more involved if she's not already at this point too, so.
All right, moving into the Spanish trip to Costa Rica.
Hi, good evening. I'm Chris Steiner, I teach Spanish at the high school. So this year we are embarking on a new endeavor, and that would be a course embedded experience abroad. So we've had voluntary travel school-wide experiences, so this is something that we really want to connect right with the course itself. So we have a plan. We are looking into going to Costa Rica. Due to safety, proximity, and cost, all those factors went into it. And the biggest rationale for doing that is that the courses at Yellow Springs High School and the Spanish Language Department are based around the American Council Teaching of Foreign Languages guidelines. And so I just wanted to let you know what the rationale is for that. So we base our courses off what individuals can do with the language in terms of speaking, writing, listening, and reading. And we're looking for those real-world situations and how students can manage in a spontaneous and non-rehearsed context. We try to create that as much as possible within the classroom, but actually being in that embedded culture and language experience together is really the ultimate experience, is what we're trying to prepare our students for in these language classes. So I did not print off a itinerary for you as yet, because I'm just working off a skeleton itinerary right now. So the biggest components of this trip, it's not necessarily a tour, it's a homestay and service learning experience. So of course we will be able to see some of the sites in the areas of Costa Rica. And our destination specifically in Costa Rica will not be determined until we have a registered travel group and have the calendar, the departure pinned down, and then that would determine what areas and what service that we engage in at this point. So the extent of the experience is 7 days, and usually your first and your last day are travel. So we will be in Costa Rica solidly for 5 of those 7 days. We fly into the capital of San Jose. That is our only hotel stay while there. So students are accommodated in a hotel in the capital city. They will have a debriefing of what they're going to expect, and usually there's a safety meeting that goes along with that. And then the next morning after breakfast, students will be introduced to their host families. So there's still some details to nail down in terms of our students individually placed. Are they going to be with a co-trip partner as well? So I'm still waiting to be able to get to that stage of interacting with our tour company, which is Walking Tree Travel and Smithsonian. That's who is hosting our trip. Any questions? As soon as we are able to engage a little further with the travel company, I will be able to forward over a more detailed itinerary. We have a combination of funding sources from grants to Donors Choose to private benefactors and corporate sponsors as well. The cost of the total trip is around $18.90, and then that will vary depending on when we travel. So the tentative date for travel is May 1st through May 8th. That is, they have moved that a couple times already as they're trying to find the cheapest time to go. So already they've reduced the trip by $100 per traveler. The minimum group is 8. So my goal is to start small and grow this. Priority goes to seniors. The goal is to have seniors in the 3rd and 4th year classes this year, because it's new and we do not have 8 seniors in the 3rd and 4th year program. That we are all seniors in Spanish 1 through 4 are eligible. So we will be taking a range of Spanish 1 through Spanish 4 students this year in hopes to build the upper level program a little more, and we'll continue to make those adjustments and to make that goal.
So I mentioned this, you may recall that you had my daughter in a Spanish class, so I mentioned this to her. She was pretty angry with you that she was in your class.
Always after you leave.
Yeah, exactly. She was, because she actually spent some time in Costa Rica, and in addition to safety, you failed to mention that it's awesome. Costa Rica is just fantastic. My question at sort of at a higher altitude level is, we've informally committed to an international experience for students every other year. Last year, obviously, was the enormous trip to Peru, which blew people's minds.
Yes.
So how does this connect with that, or does it step on toes, or how do we
Right.
negotiate that?
Definitely been planning very carefully that it does not. So basically, we are trying to get all but the $500 enrollment covered through grants, private funding, donors choose, and those things, so that students do have a minimal financial commitment of $500 each year. So like I said,
Are you imagining that you would run this every year or every other year, sort of on maybe on the off cycle for the other trip, or you know what I'm saying?
Because I'm really gearing this towards the senior year, I am planning at this moment in time to run this every year.
Okay.
By eliminating the cost, the private cost as much as possible, still opens up the opportunity for the school-wide travel as well. So that it is potentially a student could travel twice within 1 year.
Okay.
And this would only be open to, eventually your plan is the upper level Spanish students, not the whole high school, regardless of being in Spanish, the way the other trip was open.
Correct. This is only a
This is
course embedded
right
experience.
And
Got it.
Steve, to answer, we have had our initial meetings with Global Connections for next year's trip to Rome and Athens. So it's still, I mean, that one's still going and those plans are still in place. This is not interrupting that at all.
Okay.
And have you done these before, Chris?
This will be my 5th trip. This will be my first homestay entirely service learning experience. So we've done the tours. I have worked with EF, very successfully in the past, and they're very good about what they do. And I still want to keep that option and not duplicate that option with what I want to do. So that's why I selected Walking Tree Travel, who I have a personal connection with and know what they're all about, and I'm looking for that immersed experience in that language and culture.
I shared one thing real quick about it. So I think this is a great trip, Chris. I'm really excited that you're doing it. Super powerful for all the reasons I think everyone described. But to kind of piggyback on what you said, Steve, our goal again is to graduate students who are the global change leaders of the future. So we want kids to graduate, and the global is a key word here. If you don't have global experiences where you leave the country and you go somewhere else, you can take all the classes you want, read all the books, but if you've not actually been immersed in a different international culture, it's a radically different experience, and our kids need that. I think we're putting our kids at a distinct disadvantage if we don't teach them not only to use a second language well, but then give them exposure to another culture internationally. And so increasingly that's going to be a problem. And we're not where we need to be right now with language, and this is a perfect way to get there, I think, because I think you understand more than anybody else, Chris, the value of immersion and how critically important that is to learning a language long term. So this is a start, but maybe could roll down to middle school and elementary even, for our kids.
Yeah, and the reason we're keeping it tight and small with the 8 minimum group is the funding. I don't want to put that financial burden on the kids. I want it to be accessible for them, and I don't want students to not go into those upper level courses because they feel that they're going to be forced into this large financial burden. So even going into the future, it's still a voluntary optional experience, and of course there'll be an alternative for being unable to travel with us to the group. So I don't want that to be a deterrent either of moving into those upper level courses.
Great, that's very exciting.
It's terrific.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
Perfect. Thank you.
All right. Man, I can't believe you're gonna talk to us about a senior mass trip.
Am I the only person in the room not going on a trip?
Oh my goodness. What it might be.
I'm Ann Meekin, I'm the class advisor for the seniors, 2019. They chose Savannah, Georgia. I had a parent, kind of mandatory parent meeting with kids to choose where they wanted to go, and they chose Savannah. So I have about 23 kids came to this meeting. 5 or 6 couldn't come to the meeting, but they're interested in wanting to know where. So about 28 to 30 out of the 60 seniors want to do this trip. I've been working with Chase Travel and Events. She's out of Mason, Ohio, but she's got a contract with TL Network with all the travel. They're out of LA, so she tries to do what she can do for us. So I do have an itinerary, but I didn't copy it. So we're looking at April 3rd through the 6th, around the same time as the Washington trip. And we would be leaving on a Wednesday evening, night, arriving Thursday into Savannah. There is like a cemetery tour there, very historic. And so that's the first day, them coming off, and then we're also eating at Mrs. Wilkie's boarding house. It's a Southern cuisine, and doing a walking ghost tour that night. This is Savannah. The next day, we are going to travel to Tybee Island, Georgia. And there, we're going to do a community service project cleaning up the beach, and maybe more now with Hurricane Michael coming down. And then we will visit the lighthouse there and the museum, and then we will go on a Savannah Riverboat dinner cruise. And that would be Friday, and then Saturday, have breakfast and head back. So, quick trip. The cost is probably average like $650. We have, through the years with concessions and things, there's about $6,500, maybe closer to $7,000 now to change. Once I figure all that out, I put my last money in the concessions last night, so to see what we do that up. So I can give the parents and the students kind of a number, okay, and then do deposits and things like that.
Oh, wonderful. Have you ever been there before?
I have a long time ago.
Okay.
So yeah, we kind of cut it down a day because it was a little bit higher price.
Yeah.
So I took some of the trolley getting off and on the historic area, but
Great.
Thanks, Sam.
Thanks. Okay, band and orchestra trip to Chicago.
I'm going to call.
So the Chicago trip started many decades ago with Shirley Mullins, and it has been historically a semi-annual trip every other year. This will be my second time in 6 years doing it. In talking to the administration, I've come to the conclusion I can't plan a trip and have a student teacher in the same year. So this has been an off year with a student teacher for me because I've had 3 in the time I've been here. Last Chicago trip was mostly experiential. We went to Blue Man Group, went to Mullane Park and Willis Tower and Ada Giordano's. We are doing all those things again, but we're adding a component of a learning experience that we're calling a program exchange. So a classmate of mine from NIU is teaching at Belvedere South High School, which is about 45 minutes northwest of Chicago, and we'll be at their school for the afternoon, and he will work with my students and I will clinic with his, and then we'll kind of play for each other in concert at the end of the day. Prior to that, the elementary schools I taught at in Illinois are about half an hour further down the road, and we will be doing our kind of service element of the trip of going and performing short concerts for those K-8 elementary schools that are about 100 students each, and then maybe getting about a half an hour of time for our high school kids to work with their middle school young kids on kind of one-to-one peer mentoring things. Mr. Hatter and I have talked about adjusting the itinerary a little bit to maximize what we're doing in travel per day. There's a possibility of also, if the timing works out, I'm still working on the nuts and bolts of the itinerary, making a stop at Northern Illinois University as we did last year to work with the two gentlemen there who build and write and teach music for the steel pan, which is the instrument of Trinidad and Tobago, which is an amazing experience, and they're one of the top schools in the country for that. So that on the last trip was a great about 2-hour workshop, and that would be possibly in the afternoon, which they say is better for them. We did it in the morning last time, and they had pulled people kind of out of their normal schedule. So afternoon is when their normal class happens, and they'd be able to do more with us. The time frame would be early February, and when Mr. Hatter and I talked about this trip initially, we talked about scheduling this with the intent, or intentionally, around when students start to select their coursework for the next year. And this is a big, kind of not a buzzword around band and orchestra, but over the years when seniors have their little blurb of what their favorite memory was of high school, about 6 to 12 students would mention the band and orchestra trips either to Chicago or New York with my predecessors. So these are great recruiting tools for us in the upper levels, as Chris said about his trip, and then also it's something to look forward to when they get to that high school level. Field any questions?
Well, it was a great trip last time you did this, so that, I mean, it all worked out.
Exactly, last time.
Yeah, exactly. So, sounds wonderful.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Brian.
One of the great things about our schools right now is we're really believing in learning by doing. And so this is us walking that walk and making sure we're actually having kids get out of the building and doing things out in their community, beyond the walls of the school, the classroom. We've talked extensively with staff about wanting to take more field trips, not less. In a time where school districts have, in the past 15 years, eliminated field trips, especially around testing time, we actually increased them. And I think it's a really positive thing for our schools that we offer our kids that's very different than most public schools in Ohio. It's a difference that Yellow Springs makes.
Just quick, do all of those presentations, all three, could use funding from other sources?
Always.
Always.
No, I'm just trying to figure out.
I didn't mention funding in my presentation, so I can cover that really quickly. We do a multi-year fundraising effort for this trip, so when they enter the middle school, we do a yearly fundraiser, which used to be called Cheese and Sausage. It's now opened up. The same representative works with us. He has started his own company called DMR Express, and they've opened their product line up a little bit, so we have
Everything in that.
yeah, it's a pretty wide-ranging catalog. We just got our sales turned in from the sale that happened 2 weeks ago, and we netted about $1,100 in profit, and we are sitting on about $6,000 in the student activity fund for music to divvy up between the people who are going. My goal is, since we're going to be performing on the road, my goal is to make it possible for all, I think it's 32 of my high schoolers to go this year. And at this moment, with the cost of the trip being around $520, divvying up what we have defers the cost per student by about 40%. So potential for some more small fundraisers or gifts. Another thing that we're doing is I've been involved in helping to re-initiate the Yellow Springs Youth Orchestra Association, which is a 501c3 nonprofit that actually helped get the orchestra program going in the 60s with Shirley Mullins, and she and I and Dennis Farmer are like legacy members. We go to all the board meetings, but we're non-voting members, so I've been on that board trying to help them rewrite their mission statement, and giving scholarships and grants is something that they're very interested in. So there's a possibility of applying for this on a student-by-student basis.
Cool.
I expect to see you busking on Saturday, Ryan.
Alrighty.
All right, thanks for all the presentations, everybody. Appreciate it. It's all very exciting, and we have early mornings tomorrow and cold mornings.
Yes.
Many of you.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, moving into the administrative reports.
Okay, today they're separate documents.
So, the main focus of my report were a couple of things that go right along with the theme that we were just talking about, getting kids out of the building, having them learn by doing. So we had our Camp Kern trip, which happens every 2 years. We take 5th and 6th graders. It's a lot of planning and a lot of effort, like lots of these trips are. So the goal is always for 100% of the kids to go. It's a much more affordable trip than some of the ones we heard about before, and so we almost get there every time. This year it was really the only kids that didn't go. It was by choice, they had different reasons. So we were able to take all but I think 4 students, so that was great. So we took all the kids there. It was there were lots of challenges that they faced from just being away from home for the first time. Some of them have never slept away from home, believe it or not. Being away from their parents, sleeping in a cabin with like really squeaky bunk beds, to keep everyone up. And then like some physical challenges too, like the hiking. I mean, they are hiking and they're on the move all day. I mean, there's no stopping. So it's very challenging for some of them, from all of them really. We were able to add the zip line this year, which was we've never done that at Camp Kern before, and we were going to try to do it no matter what, but our PTO came through and they funded that. That was $10 per student, so we had about 120 kids there. So it was a significant expense, and that's really difficult. I mean, I think a lot of people in this room wouldn't be able to do the zip line because it is so.
Not me.
You just look at it, it's this huge tower, you have to climb up through these ropes, and then you're out on a platform, and you have to jump off the platform and trust that you're going to be caught, and the zip line's going to work, which it always does, but it's crazy.
Not every time.
We didn't lose anybody, which is great. So you see a picture of one of our students at the tail end of the zip line. That was when she was hanging there, you have to bring a ladder over for them to like climb down and get off the zip line. So I think it was really, really an awesome experience for our kids. We were lucky in the fact that we were able to go early in the school year. Traditionally, it's kind of happened in the spring, but we were able to get in right at the beginning of the school year. I think we'd only had 3 or 4 weeks with the kids before we went. So this definitely was intentional, and it helped us to kind of create some teamwork and some bonds really early in the school year. All the teachers went, so it was their teachers were there, their friends were there, and I think we've seen some really good gains from this already. Just kids coming back and doing a great job together in the classroom. And another thing, this is not on the report, but I want to give kudos to my 5th and 6th grade teachers because they took it upon themselves this year to change the way that we're doing lunch, and they're actually having their kids eat in the classrooms, like family style. They set up, they have placemats that they created, they eat together in small groups, they clean up, we bought new trash cans so that they could like take care of their trash and roll it out and dump it in the dumpsters. And basically 5th and 6th grade teachers felt that was really, really important to create more community and to be able to kind of field issues and just talk more. And it's significant because they're in charge of their kids for more of the day than they used to be in terms, because we used to have duty and they were like on duty for 15 minutes or so. Now they're taking on that whole lunch period, which is 30 minutes, and they're eating with their students, and it's really cool. And it goes right along with the Camp Kern philosophy of teamwork and collaboration and everybody doing their part. So really awesome. The other thing is PBL. This picture. This was really cool. I did not put the picture of me dressed up as a butterfly, which was like my part in this, and it was ridiculous. I mean, the costume I wore was really silly. But there's a lot of PBL jumping off right now. People are launching, but in particular, this is a 3rd grade project where they are focused on its connections with the Lion King. It's about quest stories. It's about finding, looking inside and finding like what your adventure is or your quest has been to this point in your life, or maybe it's goal setting for where you want to go. So it's an intensive writing project and a really creative project, and they created a quest in our backyard for their kids to go on an adventure where they had to follow clues and they had to go from one place to another, and it was based off of a children's story. I don't know the title of it, but they created this as a launch experience in the backyard. This was our 3rd grade team, and it was awesome. I mean, there are more pictures, but there were cobwebs everywhere, and enchanted forest, and this is like the all the way to the right is the lava field that they had to get through by using some things that were created at the middle school level, some low ropes kind of challenge things, and that was it was great. And it's actually this is what I'm seeing around the building as people are launching PBLs. There's a lot of creativity, there's a lot of time and energy and thought being put into these projects. The Lion King musical is something that's kind of connecting projects across the building. Even if they're not specifically related to the Lion King, they're related to those themes and some of the dynamics in the story. So I feel like we're in a really good place right now where the projects are really, really high quality, so things are going well.
Oh, nice. Anybody? Okay.
Nice. I do want to see the butterfly picture. though.
Yeah, no,
I'll show you
no.
later. I think we're entitled to that as board members.
It's ridiculous.
All right, Jack.
This isn't it, right?
No, it should have like 6 pictures.
I deleted it or something. There it is.
So I want to just talk briefly. A lot of the meetings already been taken up with high school, middle school stuff. But we did just finish our Into the Wild project. For me, that's kind of our model learning outside of the building project. We had every 7th grader participate this year. We had 2 students that did not complete the biking, but their parents drove them down, so they were still able to take part in the rest of the trip. So we had every single student go. The price was only $20 for the kids for a 3-day trip, which is, I think, pretty incredible. I do want to thank the Community Foundation for a significant grant that offset the cost. But I intentionally chose pictures. So that first picture, that's about a third of our kids biking. And for many of our kids, this was a longer trip than they've ever taken. So the first day alone, they biked 36 miles, and they bike 54 miles overall in 2 separate days. So the very first day we had a student who crashed about 8 miles in, and he couldn't go on after that. He said he hit his head, but when we got to lunch he told us the truth that he didn't hit his head, he just didn't eat breakfast. So he was lightheaded. So after he ate lunch, he got on and he rode the last 16 miles after lunch. But I think that's really important because that student learned to ride a bike at school on our Well Wednesdays so he could participate in this trip. Our teachers taught him how to ride a bike. So I thought that was really, really neat. And when I think about what kids are learning in other schools, I mean, that's a life skill that kids aren't getting other places. And I also chose this because we've been doing Well Wednesdays, and Miss Lohmeyer and her PE class, our kids are taking bike rides for PE. So our students were doing 16, 18-mile train rides for their PE class, and they did it during the school day this year. So every Wednesday we had our families all bringing bikes in. And I know that was a huge inconvenience for the families, but it gave real legitimacy to a PE curriculum that in many schools is either being eliminated or just kind of diminishing. The second picture over to the right, that's Becca Eastman working with our students, and that's at Spring Valley Lake. So we partnered with YSI, and they provided all the instrumentation. And then we also, through our grant, we were able to buy water testing strips. So we were able to test water quality at the lake using what professionals actually use, and then comparing those results to what kind of amateurs use. So that was really cool. And normally at that spot, if you just go across the bike path, you can actually go right down into the Little Miami River, and you can test the water quality in the river compared to the lake. And it's amazing how the water is different. But we had rain for 3 days before the trip this year, so the water level was too high that we couldn't actually go down in the street and do that. But when I think about the 7th grade science curriculum, it's a lot about the water cycle and how pollution can enter the water cycle at different places. So for our kids to actually be out and we stop at different points and look at like farmland and where there's opportunities for runoff and those types of things, it's so much more real than reading about it in a textbook or even watching videos on it. If you go down and to the left, Mario, that next picture is So this is the kids arriving at camp, and this was the first year in 3 years that we didn't have a crash when we came into camp because the kids are so excited and they hit the gravel and somebody's tires always slide out inevitably. But I put this picture in just because I think it captures the sense of accomplishment for our students. So the idea that they've just biked 36 miles. And it's funny because you get there and the teachers are all completely worn out, and the kids pick up the volleyball and take off running, and it's like they haven't done any activity yet. But it's just for me, I think it's really empowering for the kids to get to accomplish that. If you move over, this is a picture of where our kids slept.
Yeah.
So on our Well Wednesdays this year, we intentionally took time to teach our kids other skills. So Becca Eastman does a backpacking trip or a backpacking camp in Colorado, and they sleep in these types of structures for like 10 days straight. So she taught our kids all the different types of knots and all the different types of strategies for setting up your tarp to where you can maximize the sleeping space and that type of stuff. And our kids set up the camp themselves. So we get there, the kids have already practiced it, they know the different knots, and they know when to use each type of knot. But then they actually sleep under that for a couple of days. So the first 2 years we had great weather. This year it was cold and it rained for 3 days right before the trip. So we ended up pushing the departure back by about an hour to wait for the rain to clear out. But then, I mean, we slept on the ground for 3 days. And our teachers remarked that our kids didn't complain at all. They talked about how just the kids were just happy to be out and doing that kind of work. So. And then the bottom left picture, I put that in, it's a picture of Mr. Adolph and Mr. McCoy cooking dinner the first night.
Nice.
And I wanted to capture that because this is a trip where I think our teachers pour more into this trip than anything else that I see in our building. And I don't think that our teachers get enough recognition for the amount of time that they put in and the effort that they put in. Meeting multiple times over the summer. Mr. McCoy, that's actually his stepdad's trailer that he drove about 2.5 hours to pick up to be able to use for this trip, and 2.5 hours to bring it back when he was done. So we just have a lot of teachers who are doing different things like that to make this type of experience happen for our kids. And I just don't want to lose sight of how many great educators we have in our district and what they're doing for our kids. And then this last picture is just our kids when they finished. So we end up riding down to Nisbet Park in Loveland, and we have kind of a celebration where we invite all the families down to celebrate their kids riding in. So it's always a neat experience when the kids are coming in, and many of them haven't seen their parents for a couple of days, and it's been really hard. And then they're like finishing this great accomplishment, and their parents are there. So we end up having a celebration there, and then we get a group picture, and then they eat and hang out in the park. So that's that trip. It went smoothly again, and there are already plans, I think, for next year. So, and then the last thing I want to talk about is just the Bulldog Theater Festival. That's taking place this
Before
week.
you do that,
Yes.
can you mention what's going on tomorrow? Because it's tied to this Onto the Wild trip.
Yeah. So you're talking about the staff wellness. So we're offering a staff wellness activity tomorrow for all of our teachers district wide, where we're going to complete about half of what this trip is. So tomorrow, all of our teachers are able to participate in a 36-mile bike ride down to Fort Ancient. And then they're going to do the 6-mile canoe trip that our students get to do. So we're trying to let our teachers see how easy it is to do. Well, I say how easy, it's not really easy, but how accessible it is and how many resources we have right here. So we have staff members that are going to be participating in that as a wellness activity tomorrow.
Can I just, is this year number 3?
This is year number 3.
Into the Wild. So do we have any sense, so the original crowd is now in 9th grade?
Correct.
Do we have any sense of how they carry this experience with them? Are we sort of asking them?
Well, so I mean, when we do kind of our surveys at the end of 7th grade, almost every year, this is the highlight for many of our students. This year, I challenged our 9th grade team about a week and a half ago. I met with them, and I asked them the question of what are we offering our kids at the 9th grade level that kids could not get in any other school. Mm-hmm. And we started struggling with that question. And I shared with them, I will write the grants for them. Mm-hmm. So I think the possibilities for them are so much larger. And that was on a late start Wednesday. And that afternoon, a 9th grade student came up to me and said, I'm so excited to get to take a trip again. Mm-hmm. I said, oh, what are you talking about? He said, well, Mr. Day mentioned that the 9th grade can do a trip like we did in 7th grade.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I know that those kids are still holding on to it,
Yeah.
and that's my goal, is to have this type of learning experience take place 9th grade and 10th grade as well. So not just an experience, not a field trip, but like a true learning expedition where they're going out and engaging in academic work.
Right.
So, we also, like Matt said, we try to do it early in the year because we see gains. As soon as those kids go, we see gains for the rest of the year. But no, I think it's important, and I think our kids definitely hold on to those memories.
Great.
So I was out riding one morning because I had some cancellations in my day, and I was on the tail end of one of the groups leaving the high school, so I got to watch them all sort of file out, and I caught up with them, and I got to talk with Jack and with Cameron about it, and it's so impressive, and it's so exciting to see the kids and their excitement in doing it.
And we really try to focus on like trail etiquette and trail communication, and this year we brought in bike mechanics to work with all of our kids, so they all learn how to service their own bikes, like basic servicing of their own bikes. So we really try to make it about like real learning that they will use for the rest of their lives. So. And it's really impressive to be riding at the back of 50 kids watching the bikes.
It's a biker gang.
Yeah. So, the last thing I want to talk about is just the Bulldog Theater Festival. So Joe Terrell and Lori Sparrow-Knapp are doing great things with our theater group, and they're really trying to formalize a lot of what we've done in the past. This year, they offered a Bulldog Theater Festival, which was week-long. So they had the professional cinema fighter Jake Gunn come in, and he led fight training last weekend, and then they did a set design workshop yesterday, and they were doing a costume creation workshop tonight. And then they're actually going to be doing a talkback tomorrow at 3 o'clock. The cast of Girls Like That will be hosting a talkback for anybody that wants to join. Girls Like That is a really, really edgy show. It's a big risk, but it's really timely, and I think it's really important. It's focused around cyberbullying, and it's kind of the premise is, I believe a girl was dating a boy and sent inappropriate pictures to him, and then it's talking about how those pictures spread, and the bullying that takes place once those pictures are out there. So it's a really, could be potentially controversial show, but we felt like it was timely and it was what our kids need. So the cast of that, it's a small cast, I think maybe 11 or 12 students. But they're doing great work with it. I think it'll be really powerful for our community. But they're hosting a talkback talking about the cyberbullying part of it. And then the other show that's also going on is Romeo and Juliet. And they've been working, Lori Sparrow-Knapp has been working with Desiree Nickel at the 9th grade level. So Desiree is doing Romeo and Juliet as a 9th grade project. And Lori Sparrow-Knapp is, on her off days, is actually going in and working with Desiree and helping those students kind of experience Romeo and Juliet on a deeper level. So the shows run 10:25 through 10:28, and then the following weekend. So that's a Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and then the following weekend, Friday, Saturday, Sunday.
So you're saying the 9th graders are performing Romeo and Juliet?
The 9th graders are studying Romeo and Juliet, separate from the show.
Oh, okay.
So, but Lori's,
Gotcha.
they're kind of both running
Yeah,
together.
okay.
Some of the kids are overlapping, but not all the kids.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Lori was telling me Girls Like That is super powerful. We were just talking about it today, and I saw a clip of it that she showed me, and she said, really, it's been the emotion, I think, from our students has been really strong, and we're trying to figure out, and then Jack and I haven't talked about this yet, but Lori wants to find a way to bring it into the school day, so it's something we can do, perform maybe pieces of it or something with the kids. We're actually talking about it now for the first time with the kids, and it's maybe part of our work film series that we're going to do, and some of the other work we're doing with our students. It would be an interesting thing because it's very timely for us. So.
Well, shows from other years have had preview performances in school assemblies for the other students who weren't going to maybe get to an evening show to see. That's happened before.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's edgy. It's a minimum PG-13, possibly PG-16. You know, so we'll, you know, but it's again, it's real. It's important, and it's nothing our kids aren't hearing on a day-to-day basis at school. Yeah, obviously. So.
They're in rep, they're switching back and forth.
Yes.
Oh, they are,
Thursday,
okay.
Friday,
Yeah,
Saturday,
so
Sunday. Is that true?
Thursday is Romeo and Juliet, Friday Girls Like That, Saturday Romeo and Juliet, Sunday Girls Like That, and then the following weekend
What's the other one?
it's
Romeo and Juliet.
I think Romeo and Juliet, Girls Like That, Romeo and Juliet. I
They're
believe.
on the school calendar.
Yes, they are on the school calendar. But yeah, it's only
I
one
feel like
for
that's an
each night.
important piece of information.
Yes,
Yeah.
sorry about that.
Especially if one of them is PG-13.
Yes.
All right, cool. Well, great. Thank you. Thank you both.
Yeah.
Exciting to hear about what's going on in the buildings. All right. We are moving into the financial reports.
More now.
That's my part.
I enjoy the school part.
Oh, I thought this, I thought you were gonna say this.
Oh, no. Everything after that. Sorry, no, it wasn't directed. Sorry. No. I like it.
I was just gonna start this with saying, I've never felt so anticlimactic in my life as I do right now, after following all of that.
was a lot. No, the timing, that was terrible.
I don't have a lot to report on September, not a lot happened. So I'd rather spend the time on the 5-year forecast, but I'm gonna be pretty brief with that as well. Jack already talked about Into the Wild 3, there was a grant written for that, to YSEE, and we received $4,055 towards that project. And then, we also got another one for Race and Revolution, for $1,570 from YSEE. Jack, do you know anything about that?
So that funded Mikiwa Arimo, who's a nationally recognized local artist who creates protest banners, came in and worked with our students about the protest banners, and I think is coming in 2 or 3 more times to work with our students. And the goal is that our students will actually create these protest banners, and some of them will be displayed in our school. But then, essentially, when Mikiwa creates these banners, she keeps them, and then people can come from around the country and like use them and borrow them and take them to protest different places. So our students are hoping to create these types of banners that people can then come and use and then return to us. Bamani Mayenda is a YS grad. He's also a local activist. He's done a lot of work with the John Crawford case. He also came and spoke with our students, so that was also part of the grant funding.
Okay, so I'm just gonna move into the 5-year forecast, and I printed it out because the numbers are so teeny tiny and it's a lot to digest.
They're still teeny tiny, by the way.
I know, and it's a lot to digest at one time. I'm just gonna very briefly go over it because as I was doing it, my projections are not far off from what I had projected before, so there's not a lot of differences or anything that I need to explain. Just to kind of update TJ, since he's new, schools are required to submit 5-year forecast by October 31st of every year, and then we do an update in May, so by May 31st of every year we have to do an update. You can update your forecast at any time if you choose to. It is posted on the Ohio Department of Education website. I should have brought the assumptions that go with it. I have to type up all of the assumptions behind my forecast. It gets submitted with the forecast to the Ohio Department of Education, so that's up there too, so people know where I'm getting my numbers from. So to just briefly go over what the 5-year forecast is, it has 3 years of history, and then where we're at, what I put in for the budget for this current year, and then 4 years after that. The top part is the revenues, and then the expenditures, and then we show where we think our cash balance is going to be over these next 5 years. The purpose of having the 3 years of actual on there is just to show how much volatility you have within these areas of revenue and expenditure. So just to briefly go through some of my assumptions for the general property tax. 2 years ago, our property taxes collected actually decreased, and then last year they increased. In 2017, that was an update year where the county auditor does a computerized update of property values all over the county, and our property values went up, but as we have talked about many times before, a lot of times that means that your tax rates are actually going to go down because your property values went up and we can't collect any more money than what we had voted in. So we did get a small increase last year because of any new properties that have been constructed would also be put on the tax certificate for that as well. The tangible personal property tax is just what's left that we get on just a little bit of telephone and public utilities. That's relatively stagnant. I don't know why we had such a large year last year. I'm scaling that back down in my projections because I don't know. I mean, we've been typically around 97,000 every year for a long time now, so I'm not depending on getting that much money. The income tax, that's one that's gone up and down, up and down. Not really sure where we're going to end up because we had such a large increase from 2017 to 2018. I have just put it in there. I guess I can't say it's conservatively at 2% because we have decreased some years, so we'll just have to see where that ends up, and I'll keep you updated throughout the years. I always do when we get our quarterly distributions. The foundation payments right now, we're pretty much going to get, it doesn't really matter what our student count is, we're basically going to get around $1.4 million. That still is way higher than what we received years ago. We've just been very fortunate in the past 2 biennial budgets to get a large increase and have it stay in there. That still makes it very uncomfortable to depend on that, but I have kept in there about $1.4 million every year in state foundation money. And our property tax allocation is the money that we receive from the state for the homestead and rollback credits that are on property taxes. So those move basically in conjunction with your tax collections. The other amount of money that was in there is when we were getting tangible personal property tax reimbursements from the state when they phased out the tangible personal property tax. That is also being completely phased out within the next 3 years. They're phasing it out by 20% a year. So I have put in those numbers. If you see those numbers being relatively the same over the 5-year period, it's because we used to receive about $28,000, and that's slowly going to get down to 0. So I've taken those figures out. The other financing sources, basically that's just refunds from prior years. Sometimes we pay the Greene County Educational Service Center too much, they'll give us a credit, credits, checks we receive, so I never know how much we're going to get in that. And then the $10,000 is if I have to advance money at the end of the year to a fund that's in the red and it has to pay the general fund back. That's also another number that sometimes we have that in there, we have that need, and sometimes we don't. So for our salaries, our expenditures are this matches the appropriations that I brought to you in September for your approval. TJ wasn't here for that. The appropriations are actually the line item budget that I put into the computer system that generates a report and says, okay, here's what we're going to spend in every single fund in the district that we have. So this, usually by this time of year, this is very accurate for this school year, unless we have some sort of savings. Just to briefly go through some of the assumptions I had with that, we had pretty large increases in insurance this year, which were 5% and 3% for I think our vision, and our life insurance also went up, so they all increased. But I don't anticipate that happening every year, so I just take an average and either put it over the 5 years, or for dental and vision, they typically will have an increase maybe every other year. That's factored into the forecast. The retirement and everything, that's all based on what the salaries are, and the Medicare, workers' comps, based on what we pay in salaries. Our supplies and materials are what is put into the building budget, and then all of the other areas that I budget. And I just put in like a percentage increase for that every year. One of the big things I wanted to touch on is purchase services. I'm sorry, I skipped over that. Because if you look, we've been right around 1.1 million for the past 3 years, and this year we're at 1.4. And one of the reasons is because when we were working with the Greene County ESC and budgeting for this year, we thought we were going to have some of the increased costs that we're not going to have. But I already know that, but I had already appropriated for it. So I'm just I scale that back down the next year. We also have in there, with our attorney fees running the way that they are, I had to put in a large budget amount for that this year, but I'm not depending on that staying in there, so I also backed that back out in future years. And hopefully, because we've been trying to do interest-based bargaining, even though we have a bargaining year this year, we've been trying to do interest-based bargaining without attorneys or union representation, so hopefully we'll keep that process going, and then we won't have large attorney fees for that either. So I did scale that back, but I didn't want you to freak out about why it's 1.4 million. I looked in the budget and everything is substantiated to go in there. The other thing is we've had pretty large increases in electricity and water, as our community has felt the same, so that has had an effect on the school district as well. And then we have our capital outlay. This year, we pay for a bus, so that's why we're typically somewhere around $90,000 in capital outlay. That is, the majority of that is for our technology needs, but we also pay for a bus this year, and a bus is around $90,000. So this year we're paying for that bus, and then I took the bus back out, and then everything else is going to go towards just regular equipment needs and technology needs. Our House Bill 264, we make our last payment in 2021. And that's an energy savings project that we did when I first started here, so it was back around 2009, 2010. We will have paid that off. And then we have our other, which is fees that we pay the county auditor's office, which are, they're over $50,000, $60,000 a year. An audit for us is around $25,000. We have to pay to have our cash balance books made to look like business books and go from cash accounting to accrued accounting. That's about $7,000. Those are kind of things that fall in there, our memberships and some of the things we pay, liability insurance. But we are on every other year audits. We get audited every 2 years. We get audited this year, so I had to add in about $25,000. Then I'll take that out the next year, add it back in the next year. So that's why that one kind of goes up and down. So just if you look at where we are at with our deficit spending, we have some rather large expenditures happening this year that are going to be probably just this year, which could potentially put us in a deficit spending situation this year unless our revenues come in higher than what I think that they might be, which is, that happened last year, but we had a big, our income tax was almost $200,000 higher than normal. So that was a big increase for us. That might have been a windfall, might be something that stays consistent, we'll have to see. But the board usually likes to do a lot of budgeting decisions based on the excess of revenue over expenditures. So just in summary, if you go to the next page with the graph, maybe.
Bar graph?
Which one? There's more than one bar graph.
Right, it's just the next page is our revenue and expenses in summary to show you kind of up close what we're looking at for deficit spending and what that does to our cash balance over time and where we've been before and where we're at now and where we're projected to go. One very important piece of information I didn't say, but I say every time I present this, is when I do the 5-year forecast, I put in a salary increase of around 2%. And that is covering basically what we call the steps on the salary schedule, because that's something that has to be negotiated out, not in. So it's an assumption that we make, but there's no raises built in here. So when we negotiate, then that bottom line is going to get dug even deeper. So we just have to keep that in mind because we're going to have a session soon, start planning for negotiations for this year. The next graph, the green and the blue with the revenue and expenses, that's just a different way of showing you how you start eating into your cash balance when you start deficit spending. And then the last graph is the one that we talk about usually only once a year, and it's talking about our salary and benefits to revenue. You want your salary and benefits combined to be no bigger than 80 to 85% of your budget, because if you start spending over that, you're going to be taking away from other things just for salaries and benefits. So you just want to make sure you're maintaining that and where you want to be. So of course, that's going to increase with modest revenue increases projected. And then with the raises being in there right now at just 2.12%, these could grow and get bigger, but that's just something we need to talk about when we talk about, what we're going to talk about for what we're going to put in on the table for negotiations. The only other thing I want to talk about is I talked a little bit with Aida because I do my best thinking in the shower, and as I'm showering, I'm thinking, I don't want to put out there ideas for how we can take our cash balance and make these little restricted sects of cash balance money until, I think we should have a work session and talk about it. I really feel like it's very, very important that if we are going to take money and set it aside, that we're not going to spend towards the regular operations of the district. I really want to be very thoughtful in what we do in planning, because you can untie that money. Just say we're going to put in $20,000 a year that's going to go towards putting a new roof on, and then 8 years from now we pass a building levy and we're going to get new buildings, so you don't need that money anymore. The board at that time can pass a resolution to say, okay, we're going to release that money and put it somewhere else, but it's probably not going to be any of you, and you're not going to know the rationale behind why we put it there. And this has to be very well documented, very well planned out. It has to be not just throwing money aside, it's got to be for what we think we really can actually use the money for. With roofs costing so much, that is definitely one that I would say is going to be one that we need to look at, probably setting aside some general fund money, because our PI levy is not going to cover the cost of putting on, like, even just possibly repairing the gym roof or restoring the gym roof. So that's one. We probably want to put money aside for a school bus. We don't get any money from the state or anything for school buses, and at $90,000 to $100,000, if we sock away $20,000, $30,000, because I know we still have another bus that we could replace right now, and we've bought
Two in the past 6 years.
two since I've been here. But still, we're driving buses that are 20 years old.
They were all pretty old.
And also when you do that, we're so small, we want to take our bus, a decent bus, and put it in as our spare, because we'll have to take the bus down to be repaired, and sometimes it takes days, and we have to drive a spare. So you don't want to have a limping spare as well, you want to have a decent spare. So these are just things we can plan for, and I just would like to maybe talk about setting up some type of work session where we could just sit, where I can have planned with Mario and Craig, and the principles of what we could possibly set aside money for, and then bring those ideas to you, see what ideas you may have, and then come together and make some decisions. And then what I would do is revise the 5-year forecast, and I would have to put that down. I'm not going to show you the numbers on the forecast, but down at the bottom is where we have that $354,000 contingency fund right now that we don't touch. That's kind of our little savings account. Those monies would go down there. And then those get subtracted out, and then you get your bottom line for what you can budget for and what you can negotiate with. So it's just very important. They're just big decisions to make, so. That concludes my report. Wow. I know it's a lot, I'm sorry. I'm trying to talk really fast.
Well, I will just second that. I think that the sort of planning forward budgeting discussion should happen at a work session, and that's the only item on the agenda for that work session, because I think it would require our concept. Why are you smiling at me?
You don't want to add a few other things?
Yeah, no,
Yes, Steve and I, we already have.
exactly.
We've talked about that.
So I would like to do that sooner rather than later, just so that we can really start to do some good planning.
Well, and this all goes hand in hand with what we kind of feedback we got from the facilities issue and so forth. So that would be really good.
Can I add one more thing on the tail end of what Donna said, that in terms of roofing issues, so we know we have to repair or replace the high school gym roof, which is going to cost at least $100 and something thousand. And when they were on that high school gym roof, looking at it, they looked a little bit south, and they noticed the gym roof on the shoebox was not looking good.
mean the roof on the
The roof on the
shoebox.
shoebox, yeah.
and the
Yeah,
gym.
no, sorry, the roof,
Yeah.
there's no gym roof on the shoebox, 'cause it's not big enough to have a gym. But, yeah, and so the shoebox roof is a problem, and if that isn't, they're gonna do a tensile strength study of that and see, you know, how long it lasts, but if that needs to be replaced, we're talking about investing another $150,000 into a structure that needs to go.
It's over 30 years old and should.
And it's falling apart.
Should
And
be
that's
taken out
a
of the
huge,
fund.
huge problem for us, so. But I'll talk more about that later, so.
Thank you, Dawn.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so we are moving into the adoption of the consent calendar, financial portion, 3.2 through 3.3. Is there a motion? Do
So
we-
moved.
Yeah, it was, second?
I'll second.
All right. I think everything else is pretty clear there. So, anybody have anything? No? Roll call.
Steve two,
Yes.
DJ,
Yes.
Aida,
Yes.
Sylvia,
Yes.
Steve.
Yes.
All right, superintendent's report.
Thank you. So, first, we have a permanent improvement levy coming up here in November. What's the election, is it the 6th?
November
Yes.
November 6th. The levy committee was sort of late to get going, partly at least because honestly, I think a lot of people are gun shy to be part of the levy committee at this point, after the last levy committee. That was, that felt pretty strongly attacked, honestly, and trying to really volunteer their time to support schools. And so it's hard to get people together to do that. And so but they are formed now, and they're very small, but we have to get information out to the community about this levy as quickly as possible in as succinct a way as possible so people know this is just a renewal. We're not talking about any additional funds being levied. It is up this year, so we had to do it before the end of the calendar year, and this is the last election to do it in. So it originally was passed as a 1.2 mil levy, which is years and years ago, and it's been factored down to 1.09 mils, but it will appear as 1.2 mils on the ballot, which is kind of crazy because we're only going to be levied on 1.09.
Oh, 09.
Do they always just have to-
09, I'm sorry, yeah.
009 cents.
Do they always just have to list it as
They do.
the amount it was originally?
Which is
even
very
though-
deceptive. I mean,
It's because it's
it's
renewal,
hard enough
it
to
has
pass levies.
to
Yeah.
follow
Oh, it has to say the
verbiage.
same thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so you're just renewing it from what the terms were back then.
Right, but you're reading the same amount, not 1.2 now. 1.2 was originally passed, I guess, 15 years ago or whatever it was.
Probably.
It's the same dollars.
Yeah, but I think the important thing to point out, a couple things, so no new taxes, so we're getting the same amount, we're not increasing it, it's a total renewal. And if it doesn't pass, we lose $135,000 a year in maintenance money, which is what's used for. It's not renewed starting January 1st. So we go so we couldn't pass it again in May and recoup that money. We would lose $140,000 automatically if it doesn't pass. That's a guarantee. And then next year we'd have to pass another levy, a brand new levy, which wouldn't be subject to the homestead rollbacks, which actually would cost villagers more in the end, once that passes than this would be, because those discounts that people get under the current levy would go away, because it'd be a brand new levy under the new system, the new laws that were passed a couple of years ago. So I think that's it. So I think the campaign is trying to get people to write letters. It should be a pretty easy sell, right? It's just a renewal, no new money. We're not asking for any more. We actually lose money if it doesn't pass. But our worry is that maybe we don't get the message out enough. And it's like right after the Greene County levy. And so the concern is maybe that they see the increase from Greene County and then they see ours. And then there's a confusion there around that. So I hope that folks can see that it's a totally different levy. So,
Well, and the school board did send a letter to the news, just that detailed succinctly the particulars of all of this.
Yeah, and then the back page of our quality profile, which is going out next week, and I actually sent it online to your Facebook, I think yesterday or the day before, has all the details about this levy too. So we just want to get the message out. So.
And early voting has already started, and it's issue number 4.
Okay, so the second thing I want to just give you an update on our facilities work that we're doing kind of over the past few months. So Let's talk about land use, which was one of the charges you gave me. We're making progress there. So the idea, for those who are watching for the first time tonight, is the board is interested, partly because I think there's concern in the community around affordability. And you can kind of kill two birds with one stone by doing this, is looking at our current facilities and our land to determine what can we use it for. In other words, could we sell off, as an example, part of our land to developers to build housing for affordable housing for families? And you kind of kill two birds with one stone. You help the affordability issue, and you essentially raise funds potentially to offset the cost of a levy in the future. So both of those would be beneficial, I think. So we're looking at things like what would the community get for the Morgan Fields if that became land use for that? What about the land south of the high school? What about maybe the back 200 feet or so, or at Mills Lawn that butts right literally onto Phillips Street? What if we did that? What could that? And so, to be clear, this is just conversation at this point. We want to know what's out there and possible, and then we can be informed based on the results of that, and the whole community can be informed, frankly, what the value would be of that and what we can get from that kind of that kind of sale or whatever we do. And maybe there's other uses for the land too that we can come up with. So we've engaged the Greene County Planning Commission on this, and they've come out and for free, which is great. They went on Craig just about a week ago and checked out all the land, and they're going to create a report that then they're going to present to us in the next few days. I think next week they'll have it. And once I have it, I'll share it with you. We can share it with the community, and people can see what they're recommending and suggesting. They said if it doesn't produce what we want it to produce, the report, then we can just build it more. So we can get them to do more after that. So that's that piece. And if it's not what we want, we can also contract with somebody to do it. So I was working with two different groups. One was Greene County, one was a private developer, or it's a planner. And the planners, it was really slow moving. It just didn't quite get going. The developers, the county worked very quickly, so that was great. So I want to give kudos to them for working with us fast, and they were free. So hopefully we'll produce the kind of report that we want. It'll be great. The second piece of the facilities update is around a second facilities evaluation, which is something the community expressed to us after the last election that we're committed to doing now. And I've gotten 4 different quotes. I was waiting on a quote from a group called Feeling There, who I think is pretty fantastic in what they do with schools, and they're visionary and their thinking and how they operate. And I finally had a conversation with the, I guess he's the chief, the principal, what his title is, at Feeling There in Michigan. And he said that his kind of comment to me was, why are you getting a facilities quote now when you don't even really know what the community wants you to do? You don't even know what you're looking for in that facilities quote, which I think was a really interesting point. He said, what you really need to do is start with that committee that we're talking about establishing, and getting the committee to, a citizens committee, to basically start with what is our vision for the kind of school we want. What do we want what is our instructional vision? What do we really want our schools to produce and do for our kids? And getting that committee to work through that vision. And then from there, with the whole purpose of getting to facilities, I mean, that's the idea. And then from there saying, okay, now that we know what we want as a committee for our schools, what would it take to make our schools, does our schools can't do it now? And what would it take, or if it can, that's great. What kind of things do we need to do? If it can't, what do we need our schools to do to get to that point? And so does that mean some renovations? Does it mean a K-12 facility? Does it mean a brand new building, 2 brand new buildings? Does it mean that we can renovate the whole thing? What does that look like for us as it is? Does it mean just maybe technology upgrades? I don't know, electric. And then that committee would work through all that. They would then, based off of that, then we would get potentially a facilities evaluation again to see what that looks like and what the cost would be. And then they work through that data and come up with a proposal that they would then work with the board and the community on, trying to sell the board on it, sell the community on it, change, sort of do some iterations with the community and the board, and then hopefully put something together that the board and the community feel good enough about to put on a ballot. Assuming we have a ballot, or assuming there, I mean, it could be nothing, it could be we don't put anything on the ballot at all. I don't know what the result would be, but I think it's important to start from the beginning and inception again. And he made a really good argument that this is the way to do that, especially as bad as we lost. You know, that it's super important to start from scratch and get people from the beginning to, and part of that is visioning. And so it was a wake-up call to me because I was thinking maybe, you know, we think we have an idea of what the vision for education is for our community and what our community wants. We talk about project-based learning and how important that is and what we do with it, but does the community have the same definition of project-based learning as we do? Maybe not. This was like part of a strategic plan in 2010. So one of the disadvantages of having a 10-year strategic plan, which we didn't really talk about at the time much, is that it changes in 5 years. In 5 years, what you thought you wanted 10 years ago is probably not what you want at the end of 10 years. But yet we kept on this strategic plan for 10 years that ultimately, had we stopped at a 5-year point, we might have gone a totally different direction. And so huge kind of, so I would recommend that going forward, we shouldn't do a 10-year plan again. I don't think that was a good idea. I think probably a 5-year plan is a better move at maximum going forward as we think about the future, but I'm sort of digressing a little bit. So I think that's a good way to approach it, and getting a clear idea of the instructional vision from the community, and then letting that kind of steer the process of where this goes. The key is to get a really great committee. And so for me, and I've shared this with the board and with the community, I think that committee has to be representative of people who were supportive of the levy and people who were against the levy. It needs to be a combination of both. People who are engaged is really important, and maybe people who can talk really rationally to one another and really have good clash and debate, and in a way that makes sense. So we're trying to get, so I'm thinking about getting the most rational, level-headed people that were on opposite sides of the debate together in a room, and maybe, you know, trying to wrestle together with this and figure out what the right move is for our community. It may be the right move going forward. And I think fielding there could be great facilitators for that. So this is a little bit of a shift from where we were the last time we talked. But it was so they're going to give me a proposal for that idea. And once I get it, I'll share it with you, and we can decide if that's something we want or not. But I think they're on the right track, and I think they get it. You know, they clearly understood, well, wait a minute, you have to start from the beginning. You're not, this is, the community clearly sent you a message, you have to start from the, and part of making changes is starting with a vision. You have to start with a common vision and understanding what that is. And our problem is our vision started 10 years ago, and here we are in 2018 at some level. So, you know, I don't know if it shifted that much, but I think it may, I don't know if we're all on the same page of what it means.
Yeah, this is the first we're hearing.
Yes, I've never shared this with you before now.
I don't want to bog us down because we have other business to do.
Yeah.
But I also don't want to conflate some things unnecessarily to make a complicated problem even more complicated. It doesn't really matter much what kind of education we are doing in that building. The shoebox is still falling apart.
Right.
So we could be doing project-based learning, we could have kids sitting in nice rows of desks being rapped on the knuckles by teachers, and the building is still falling apart. So at some level, it seems to me that kind of large-scale vision of where the district wants to go pedagogically, intellectually, and so forth is not connected to some of the really, you know, to the fact that there's asbestos in both buildings. That doesn't matter what kind of educational philosophy we have. So I appreciate the process that they're describing, but as I said, there's some other, I don't want to mix these things up.
Yeah, but
you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I know exactly what you're saying, and I agree with you, Steve. But the point is, I don't think the community agrees with you completely. And I think the problem is our community doesn't see that necessarily the same way we do. And so I agree with you, but people don't see it that way. So we have to figure out a way to, the only way I think to potentially get people on board is to really start from the beginning. And I feel like there's got to be a, I mean, we can talk more about this later, but I feel like there's got to be a process with which we have some common understandings about what's going on. And I think we assume we have assumed things about our community that aren't really true. We assume that people would get
Well, based
shoeboxes
on
of
doing
each
that
problem.
kind of a process
Right.
that many years ago.
Right.
I wouldn't say it was an assumption, I would say maybe some of it's outdated. But the process you're describing kind of sounds like what we did
Right, when I say
before, but it's been a while.
I'm talking about the assumptions going into the levy that we just had. So not necessarily the strategic plan.
Gotcha,
So,
okay.
yeah, to be clear. Yeah,
We need to talk.
So, yeah, we can talk, but the only reason I brought this up now is because I just had a phone call 2 days ago.
Yeah, yeah,
So
that's
really,
fine, right, I get it, I
It
get it.
shifted my thinking a little bit, just
Yep.
within 24
Great
hours.
to
No,
see the
that's
proposal.
great, that's
Yeah,
great,
right.
yeah.
Because, you know, you and I have talked about this, and
Right.
and I think I understand where you're coming from, and there does need to be some scoping, right? I mean,
Yep.
of the community, and especially those who are against it, and why, and what the rational way to go forward is, so that you can fix the shoebox, and we can fix the other things.
Yeah, but, you know.
And your point about project-based learning, I think is really good, and it's not even just what project-based learning is, but the value that it brings to the students, I don't know is completely well understood outside of the community that is actively involved in the schools. So trying to get that out even more, like even just the things we saw today about the different trips that are going on, right? I mean, you don't always see that if you're not actively involved in the schools, and trying, I don't know how you communicate the impact on the students and what you see all year long, the benefits from that. I mean, that'd be incredible. I just think back to, when I was kind of more sequestered in traditional school, I would have loved to have some of those things, and what that would have meant to me growing up. So,
yep,
we just kind of got to get that message out there of how important and impactful it is for our kids.
Yeah.
Make some better systems.
So the last thing about facilities is Johnson's Controls update. So this is a company that approached us, and one of the things that was sort of appealing was they talked about ways of doing major facilities upgrades without having to go to the voters for approval of the levy. In other words, you could do it by...
It's a different financing model.
It's a totally different financing model than what we've seen. And so we're waiting to hear back from them. They've done an evaluation of the facility a little bit too, and they're going to kind of get back to us, I think, Tuesday, really, so soon. We're going to have a meeting, and we'll see what they have, if anything, to offer of a plan. I'm not as confident as I was initially with this idea, as bullish on it, because it doesn't, knowing what I know about what the law permits outside of the levy process, I'm not sure there's much we could raise that would make a significant difference in that way. So, but we'll see what they come up with. State report card. So I think last year we kind of didn't address the state report card until I think it might have been November at the board meeting, and it was out just publicly a few weeks ago, and the major newspapers covered report cards across the state. And I don't like talking about this. And it's not because I don't like talking about data. It's not like because I don't want to be held accountable, or we don't want our schools to be held accountable. It's because we want our schools to be held accountable for what we value. And we want to measure what we value, not have to try really hard to value what the state says we should measure. And furthermore, that's operating under the assumption that what the state says we should measure is actually an accurate, valid, reliable measurement, which
Or
is...
stays the same from year to year.
Yeah, well, and that's a huge issue, which is not the case. So, but here's the best way for me to deal with it. So instead of really trying to look at state by state average and how we did and whether we passed or failed based on their arbitrary cut date, I think the only thing that I can reference our data to that might give us some idea of our success or growth or failure with some of this work is to compare us to the state average. So this is the average school district in the state of Ohio versus Yellow Springs schools. Very, very bright green on the right there is, what doesn't look bright on the screen, but it's bright on my screen, is the highest gains. So those are all gains where we scored at least 10 points above the state average in terms of passing percentage rate. The sort of darker green is where we passed in single digits higher than the average state increase, and then the yellow is where we were actually below the state average on tests. So I guess I want to start by just kind of working through some of these and talking about what we've seen. So if you were to look at our state report card and you saw letter grades of C's, D's, there was an A I think on there, and maybe a couple, our overall grade was a B. You know, you would think, oh, something's wrong with Yellow Springs schools, we're going down the drain, everything's bad, because that's kind of what the state wants, you know, they want schools to sort of be reflected this way. What you don't understand is that the whole state's, in this new grading system, has just hit the tank. Suddenly, we've gone teaching the same kids, using the same methods statewide, from being all incredible, excellent with distinction districts to all failing districts. Well, nothing changed. The only thing that changed is the metric and what the state said they would measure us by. So I don't want people to get caught by a moving target. And the more we talk about this, the more we purport it in newspapers and in the media, the more strength it gives this state report card. And it should have absolutely no value whatsoever because it's a completely invalid assessment. So here's an example.
Okay, I'm sorry, before you go on, can you just reiterate that the opinion being expressed here is not simply yours, but superintendents also around the state?
Yeah, all over the state, this is how people feel. And I hear it repeatedly everywhere I go.
Because we had this exact conversation at the Career Center, because Career Center superintendents are also being driven insane by this, so yes.
Well, here's an example. What kind of state assessment do you have when you go down to M2 here, which is Math 2, and the state average percentage passing of the Math 2 test for sophomores is 34.3%. What kind of test is that? You know, when a teacher has a passing average score in her classroom of 34%, we don't look at the kids and say, you're not doing your job. We look at the teacher and say, there's something wrong with your assessment. Why don't we do the same thing with the state of Ohio here? Huge problem when 34% of the kids in the state of Ohio. What message are we sending to students when 34% of the kids are passing? We're not exactly sending them a message of confidence in their abilities, and we're blaming the kids for what's happening. So all throughout you see these scores. The top average score in the entire state of Ohio was for the American Government Test, which is for high school students, and that was at 79.5%. Do you know why I think, suspiciously, why I think the American Government score, the American History score, the bio scores are all over 70% passing? Because they need those tests to pass to graduate.
Mm-hmm.
So it just so happens that the passing score is higher on those tests than they are on the third grade test and other tests across the state. The cynical me has a real problem with this assessment, but every year we have to talk about this, so I'm going to keep talking about it. Kind of going line by line from the top here. So the state average for the third grade English language arts test is 61%. Yellow Springs average passing rate was 83.3%. We were 22 points above the state average on third grade reading. As we go through fourth grade English, 26 points higher. If you look at reading, as we keep going through fifth grade, 19 percentage points higher. Sixth grade language arts, 18% higher. Seventh grade, 15% higher. Eighth grade, 14% higher. English 1 was 8% higher, which is for freshmen. English 2, 10% higher than state average, and then that's in terms of English. The math, third grade we were 16 percentage points higher. Fourth grade we were 14 percentage points higher. Fifth grade we were only 3.8 percentage points higher. And sixth grade math we were negative 10 percentage points lower. So, to be clear, we certainly, that was an outlier. It was something that clearly we have to take a look at. Matt and I have talked a lot about this extensively, and we are working diligently on this particular issue and trying to at least ask questions and understand what happened with that particular subject area and that particular grade level. Those kids are obviously seventh graders now, and so we're concerned about making sure that they grow and continue to get better. I was actually just talking to the seventh grade math teacher today, and she feels like they're doing really well. And I've seen really good growth and progress from those kids. Seventh grade math was last was a plus seven percentage points higher. Eighth grade math, and this is going to speak to the issue with this test, with this system, was 8 points lower. Now it wasn't really 8 points lower. It just said it was 8 points lower, and I have an asterisk there because it's like a huge asterisk. So here's what's happened in eighth grade. And so this is what they don't tell you when you see the results and you see them simplistically out there. So we had 45.9% of our kids pass that test, the kids who took the eighth grade math test. What they don't say is that you kids have to take the test for the class they are taking, right? So if I'm an eighth grader and I'm taking Math 1 because I'm an advanced eighth grade student, I can't take the eighth grade math test. I have to take the ninth grade Math 1 test. So 50% of our eighth graders, right, are taking took the Math 1 test last year. The other 50% who were not in an advanced math took the 8th grade math test. Well, so in any other grade level, all those kids would be together, and you'd have a much higher grade. But you're taking the kids that are have been the least successful in
Strong
math,
kids.
and that is the one that represents the passing rate score of our students. Now, that's not something to ever be proud of, but it's not an accurate measure of how our 8th graders collectively are doing as a school district. Those kids are represented on the Math 1 test, where we were 27 points higher than the state average. Right. I put an asterisk there because the truth is, if we were just talking to freshmen, it would probably be a little lower. But it's just sort of interesting that that's something that's there that nobody points out. So if you take that outlier out of approximately 21 total tests, we were below the state average on 1. Which means we were on 95% of our assessments, we were well above state average. But yet, if you look at our report card online, it says Yellow Springs is a C district, a D district, and not quite performing as well as they want us to. And this is on the core of their matrix. We don't do standardized testings in Yellow Springs. It's not our thing. We don't value it. We don't put the time into it the way a lot of other schools do. Yet, despite all of that, we're still scoring well above state average on these standardized assessments. Are there any questions about that before I move on to what I really want to talk about, which is the quality profile?
Each grade is approximately, what, 60?
Yeah,
students?
60-ish kids on average.
So you're also comparing 60 students to a pool of millions on the average.
Sylvia?
So you could have a lot more stochastic signal in there if you have just a few who didn't get math 1 year.
Yeah, it's really appalling.
I'm waiting for you to tell us.
My head's gonna explode if I think about it too much. It's really.
Well, but I think there is
really
something you can draw from the amount of green. Again, with that small sample size.
Yeah, but
we
the
do a data-
green is like an adjustment that he did.
Yeah, I know.
It's not like the data the way they're putting it out.
Yeah.
There's a lot to
Yeah.
draw from the green. The green's not what gets.
Oh, I know.
It's just really stuff
I'm
that's,
agreeing with what
and
you're saying.
again, the part 2 where it's not even if you're trying to work with it, and then when they try to do the year-to-year comparisons, and that has been a moving target for the last, I can't remember how many years. I mean, it's just,
Yeah, no, it's pernicious because it is so arbitrary. And again, this is not my Greene County Career Center report, but my 6 other colleagues from the districts in the county report the same kind of, this is madness. It just, they don't, you can't even use most of this information to do anything because it doesn't measure anything that makes any sense. And it's going to change next year anyway, and so if you try to do something for next year, good luck with that, because...
Here's what's really sad about this. Our kids are being affected. This year we have high school seniors that need to pass all of these tests to be able to get 18 points to be able to graduate. Now, the state's going to change it theoretically, but it's a big deal. And I don't know how many kids are we looking at that are really on the bubble right now, Jeff?
We're actually not in too bad a shape. A few.
So less than 5?
I would say around 5.
Around 5. But those are 5 kids out of 60. That's a big deal for us, Yellow Spring. We want to make sure all those kids are there. But this is just one more thing to prevent these kids from graduating. And these tests are so arbitrary, and it's problematic. So anyway, that's the system we're dealing with right now.
Does it affect anything else, like funding?
Yeah, 3rd grade. Well, so there's also the 3rd grade reading guarantee. So if you are not,
You can't go to the 4th.
You can't go to 4th grade if you don't pass this reading test that 61% of the kids in the state passed.
Gotcha.
Those 3rd grade classes.
But then they've actually created all these alternative tests because there's kind of
Because
a
only
hidden
61%
recognition
passed.
that the state test is not really valid enough to hold kids back. So now there are alternative ways to be able to pass on to the next grade.
Oh yeah, right here. So that's the state report card. There was one more thing I need to talk about before. Well, remind me after the quality profile. So I want to switch to the quality profile because of this issue, and because I believe that we really need to measure what we value as a school district for the community, and quit trying to keep up with the state report card, which is so sad because so many school districts are completely driven by this report card.
Sure.
They don't have boards of education in communities like ours that are not quite as impressed by the state report card and understand the truth about it. Like they really think, they live and die by that report card, and it is everything. And so we need to present a different image, and so that's where the quality profile came from. We started it 3 years ago. This is our 3rd year of this quality profile. Just a few of the stats I think I want to point out that are important. So this takes each of the priorities from our strategic plan and sort of puts out some data points around each of the priorities of our strategic plan, which is the community's vision and mission about what they want us to do. And so the first one being making our students succeed around academic achievement. So kind of points out that once again, for the 5th year in the last 6 years, our high school appeared on the best high schools list for US News and World Report. We were #1 in Greene County, #2 in the Miami Valley, and #1 in the state of Ohio, the top 4% in the nation. And 31 out of 800 high schools is pretty good in the state of Ohio. 85% of our student body pursue college after graduation. I'd like that to be higher, but I understand that there's, not every student's going to go to college, and they're actually, frankly, we need more kids going into the trades right now, honestly. And the truth of the matter is there's a huge shortage of kids going into the trades, and we need more of that. It's valuable and important. So I love this picture of Peter Day, walking the hallway at the clap out. 71% of our kids, our seniors, have taken at least one AP exam. That's really great. 60% have passed at least one. The average ACT score, so I'm not just going to point out the good data, I'm going to point out the stuff that's not particularly great. Our average ACT scores for this year were 22.4 in 2017 compared to the state average of 22. These are the kids who are taking that test. So that's not great. We normally are a point to 2 points higher than the state average. So that's something that's on my radar screen now a little bit. So I just think that's something worth pointing out. And 21 nationally. So we're still a point and a half over the national average. Mills Lawn students grew an average of 1.1 years in reading and 1.6 years in math. And so you expect 1.0 years growth at least from every student. And so we're above that in reading, but we're way above it in math, which is a really great success. And that's using our universal screener. We use the STAR program. We use STAR Math, which we measure 3 times a year. And it's far more accurate than this 1 time a year test that we do through the state. This is a really great stat. 100% of Yellow Springs High School graduates do not require remedial math and reading classes in college. 100%, compared to 70% statewide. To me, of all the data I showed you, that to me is the most impressive and valuable. At the end of the day, when our kids are graduating, they're prepared for college and life after high school. And more prepared, much more prepared than kids in other places. Let's see here. So then it goes into curriculum as well. I can tell that I'm going way too long here, so let me keep going. Peru was a trip. The Mind Matters project was really incredible. It's up now again at the high school. The Great Affordable Housing Project, our 4th graders did, is featured in here as well. It talks about developing high-performing faculty, staff members. So, quote from folks, I am blown away by everything I experienced today. This is from visitors to our schools that have come on tours to see the Deeper Learning Training Center. I'm blown away by everything I experienced today, but one thing that stood out is the culture. The students and staff at Yellow Springs have this amazing collaborative relationship that I believe stems from the process of PBL. Another teacher visitor said, the leadership's outstanding and the commitment to what's best for students in the community is very impressive. And then your staff is passionate, and that is so important. So these are just quotes we have from people who visit our schools through the training center. So this is just some things that kids are doing in terms of activities. We have a photography club now. Talks a little bit about the Bulldog Theater Festival, sports, the Community Foundation, and then expenditures. If you look at this particular graph, up the upper right-hand corner there, the bar graph on the left is Yellow Springs School's total expenditure per pupil. The one in the center is when you look at the US News Report, World Report top 25 school districts, that's what they're spending on average on their students. And then you look at the state average on the right. So we are spending well below the average of the top 25 school districts per student, yet we're performing at their level. I think that's a really powerful message that our schools and our communities are getting a good bang for their buck. So, and then we just talk about the renewal levy at the end. The last thing I want to point out to you today is, I think the last meeting, Kathy Adams and other folks were asking, what are the comment boxes or the up in the bathrooms? They are up. They've been up now for a week and a half now, and so we've already gotten, besides the toilet paper, I mean the paper towels that are dropped in there, we've already gotten one message from a student that we think is helpful. Well, it wasn't specific and we didn't have any details and it was really hardly, very, very vague, but it gave us at least some information for us to think about and start to look into and be a little bit more vigilant about at least going forward. And so
And give that student an opportunity to vent and talk about it.
Yeah.
So give them that forum.
yeah, so that's, hopefully we'll get more that way and it'll go forward. I also want to point out that I think since we've operated our protocol around Title IX work and really gotten better at that, and this year we've processed a number of claims for Title IX. And it can be anything from a high school student who may have taken a ruler and poked a girl, you know, from behind, and we had to treat that as a Title IX complaint, went through the whole process with it, to a boy coming up with a top 10 cutest girls list. That's a Title IX issue, and we dealt with that as well. So we're taking everything super seriously across the board, and really, I think we're on it, and we're doing our job to try to make that happen. So just want to give you that feedback. So, sorry for the long report.
Thank you, appreciate it. I'm a little confused because we have to approve the 4.2, but it's not part of the consent.
If it's only one agenda item, it doesn't have to be.
Oh, okay. So we're looking at a series of policies and the first reading of those policies. Is there a motion? So moved. Second?
I'll second.
All right, so as you see, there's numerous policies. Many of them are duplications of each other, and so anybody have anything they want to? Okay, roll call.
TJ?
Yes.
Aida?
Yes.
Sylvia?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
All righty, moving into the adoption of the personnel portion of the consent calendar, 4.3. All right.
4.3. See
that?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah.
Is that
The
this?
numbers.
That's, yes.
Yeah, that should be 4.3.
That should be 4.3, that's a typo, okay.
Did you get that done? Okay, great. All right.
So moved.
Thanks. Second?
Second.
All right, anything stand out here that looks pretty?
No, it's pretty standard.
Yep. Okay. Roll call.
Aida?
Yes.
Sylvia?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
TJ?
Yes.
Oh, I get it, that's why it says top is tier. Okay, sorry. Moving into board communications, we want to set up a work session for negotiations and executive session. Well, it would be an executive session, that's right.
There's another topic.
All right, and we want to do that by when?
Didn't we say after, maybe between the holidays? No, we said, I thought we talked about the week after
Yeah.
Thanksgiving, is that right?
No,
Thanksgiving.
That was for me.
Yeah, no, this is the week after.
I want to go first.
Yeah,
Okay.
well, yeah, I think that's,
Well, it makes sense for me to go first.
yeah.
Okay.
But
That
then,
way we know what we have to negotiate
Yeah,
with.
agreed,
Yeah.
agreed.
then that might be, if we wait until between the holidays, that might be too late to try to set up another one,
Yeah.
right?
We're talking about negotiating with YSCA starting in January, so it's gonna be a little bit of an earlier negotiations.
Well,
So
so
we need to get this figured out.
Thanksgiving is a little early this year. If we have Dawn's session in the last week of November, could we have this session in the first week of December? Would that work out? Not looking at the specific dates yet.
So
Can you
that
say
would be the
again?
week of the 26th of November.
26th of November, because Thanksgiving is the 22nd,
And then negotiations the first week of December.
week of the 3rd.
No, Thanksgiving's the 22nd.
Yeah, that's right,
Yeah.
the 3rd of December.
Okay, so for the week of the 26th of November, that would be for financial
Right.
session. Do Thursday the 29th, stick with the Thursday?
You
Sound good?
Yeah, that seems to work.
In the, are we talking about the evening? Or are we talking about?
Do late afternoon, I don't know. Could you do late afternoon, Steve? On the 29th?
Yeah, it's looking like Thursdays are gonna be
Good, okay.
for me, so yeah.
So 3 or 4? Is there, 3 or 4?
3. Anyone agree?
You're talking
I
about the
think so.
29th, right?
Yeah.
29th.
Early afternoon?
3 o'clock, 3 or 4?
Yeah.
Okay. Right, everybody? Got it?
Yep.
Okay. I can't believe it. Okay, 29 or 4? 3.
3. And this is
This is the
This
financial.
is the like cash carryover
Yeah.
kind of, okay.
And then Thursday the 6th?
I think I may be out of town, I don't know my work calendar.
How long are we scheduling the one on the 29th for? 3 to when?
At least
2 hours.
Okay.
Is there, can you do another day?
I think I'm gone for 5th and 6th, I can check, I just don't have my work calendar here.
Okay.
I'm not at a conference, but.
Yeah. Okay, so
4, 5, 6 is Wednesday.
Tuesday, Wednesday,
Because we could
Thursday.
talk about,
Something over.
wait a minute now.
This is December.
4, 5, 6. Because is it possible to think about the Saturday the 8th?
Right around Hanukkah too.
Only if you bring me birthday cake.
Oh.
Gauntlet thrown down, it seems to me.
Wait, what day is
Challenge
that for?
accepted.
It's a Saturday, the 8th.
All right, then.
It's just because on the public record, it's 34.
So,
Okay, so we're talking about Saturday the 8th of December,
Yes.
at what time?
Is there a time that does not work for you?
You know, there probably is, and I just don't know it yet, because it's the 8th of December. And so,
Yeah, right.
so whatever date that my kid or whatever, I don't know it yet, so just let's
Well, at 6 a.m.
Okay, so
let's just schedule
Yeah, I was gonna
this.
say, if you want to just do
Let's just
it
go for
9
it.
or
9
10
in the morning,
o'clock.
9 a.m.?
9 a.m.
Saturday.
Saturday.
So, and how long are we doing that
You can
for?
go
Also
back
2
10 if you
hours?
feel like it.
Also 2
But
hours?
just 2 hours.
2
Yeah.
hours. Okay, so this is the work meeting
For
prep
negotiations.
negotiation.
Negotiations.
Gotcha, okay.
all right, way to go, everybody.
Yeah, well, we'll see if it
So
really
don't get
works.
too excited, something's gonna happen, but.
I hope not.
All right, Green County Career Center report.
Not a whole lot to report. We also, as I've already complained about, spent some time with our state report card, which was also nonsense. But the levy is on the ballot, as you all know, for the Take Flight initiative and for the new facility. Spoke to a reporter from the Wright State student paper about that this morning on the telephone. So we're all pretty excited about it, and we'll see what happens on election day.
All right. Any other board member items?
Yeah, there's the Economic Sustainability Commission. Basically, the goal is, they'd like for us to sort of map our values and sort of look at why would the school board need to join the DCIC, and if you want explanation.
I'm sorry, what is it again?
The DCIC, the
I know
council.
District of Columbia right away, so that I know I'm wrong, I'm sorry.
No, the actual term, oh, Jesus Lord.
Designated community.
Oh, that one, okay,
Yes,
thank
the-
you.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm
But
sorry,
it's
I'm
a way
just- I'm tired
for
and there's too
the
many
community
acronyms.
to sort of divvy funds rather than compete for
Then
them.
compete for them, thank you.
And so, right, they're kind of wanting to know the school board's hand in that, like they definitely want us to be a part, but they'd like for us to at least give our values, priorities, and like why we would need to be on this. And that was just something given us to bring back, to me to bring back to the school board, just the thoughts to think about. I mean, if that were to be brought up in a work session,
Yeah.
I think that could fall under sort of future endeavors with the first one we're doing, which we're doing right now. The first work session is for,
Cash carryover.
yeah, exactly. And so I think that could fall under a brief discussion on that if we were to speak about it, because it's all about funding and bidding.
Can I ask a question? Steve, so am I correct in assuming then that the Economic Sustainability Commission is the group that's been charged with creating the bylaws or rules of the DCIC?
No, that's gonna have a
DCIC?
board, and so.
I mean, they create even the rules of the board, even.
No,
that's a-
the village, so the village has to
Okay.
do it. It's just, we were the ones, I guess, to, given, what would it look like, and so Fairborn has one, and Pickwa, a couple of people came and spoke to us how theirs worked, and that laid down a groundwork for what Yellow Springs would do, would be quite different than those. There'd be a lot more people up there. Hand in the pot. But basically, no, the question for us was, village, would this be a good idea to do it this way? And we've seen the success of others. So the village has said, we'd like to go this direction. Now we're tasked with who's involved. So the creating of that board,
Gotcha.
who's going to be it, so does that include the chamber, does that include school board, does that include,
Gotcha, so then you make a recommendation to the village, and the village will hopefully decide or not.
Right, they still decide who's going to end up being on the DCIC, and then there's, the other question is their board voting versus other groups that are just for input. So there's definitely still a work in progress, to say the least. But they just want us to bring back to our different groups what we're doing to start forming that.
Okay. Thanks. All right, I just want to announce that with the new year coming up, we need to consider board leadership and who wants what roles for the 2019 year. And as I have
You've been
mentioned,
really excited to
Everybody
bring
got
that
really
up.
uncomfortable.
I know.
I want to continue to be court jester. Yes.
Better upper game there.
Time me up on that one, Steve.
So we'll talk more about that because we'll have to figure that out by January, but I want everybody to take that into consideration. And just so that you know where I stand, I have been board president for 7 years, not in a row, of my 13 years, and 5 years as vice president. So, just so you know.
Just a hint.
Where I've been.
Wink, wink.
And I'm certainly happy to have other people take any posts that they want. And then I'd like to just let the community know that we are just several weeks out before the renewal levy, and frequently we do these meet and greets before levy. And so if anybody would like to host a meet and greet, please contact me. Or if you'd like to attend a meet and greet, some people who do host are open to having people join that. Some people would like to determine who is at those meet and greets, so please just let me know. All right.
One more thing, I want to apologize for the remark of now it's fun as now it's time for fun. I do just want to say this in other meetings, but there's a time when you're excited about reports and then it's business time, no longer smiles. And so I really hope that there was nothing or if people thought that maybe I was being in any way uncaring about what's happening. I apologize. I do.
Well, glad we got that.
I thought you were vying for court jester. I thought that was your.
Tom and I may have been the only one that actually heard it.
There's Mike, so just people
Okay, is there a motion to adjourn?
Can I add one more thing?
Oh, I'm sorry,
No,
yes.
it's okay, I just thought of it, because I still have the picture on my screen of the quality profile. So, a parent of 2 students who open enroll from another district, and this parent teaches in another district, fairly recently had told me that when the quality profile pops up in their email as a, when it gets pushed out to all the families, that especially as a teacher in another district, they were saying like this is their favorite thing that they see. because it's just such another way of looking at everything that they really appreciate. So since the new one's coming out, I wanted to remember to say that.
Yeah,
Cool.
thank you.
Okay, motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All right, roll call.
All in favor?
Yes.
Yes.
All right.
Thank you all for coming.